His name was Carlos, and he had always been a quiet, strong presence in our lives. He wasn't my son, but he might as well have been. Carlos had come into our family years ago, long before Sarah and Daniel got married. He was Daniel's best friend from college, a man who had traveled from Brazil to pursue his studies here in the United States. He was tall, with dark, almost black eyes that always seemed to carry a quiet sadness. He never spoke much about his past, but I knew enough to understand that he had come from humble beginnings. Carlos had that kind of presence, one that didn't demand attention, but one that you couldn't ignore. He wasn't the type to fill up a room with words, but when he did speak, people listened. There was something in the way he carried himself, something that told you that he had seen hardship and had lived through it, and come out stronger for it. Over the years, Carlos became like another son to me. He was always there, helping out when needed, lending a hand without hesitation. He had a warmth about him that made you feel safe, even when things around you felt uncertain. When I walked out of Sarah and Daniel's house that day, Carlos was the first person I turned to. I hadn't planned on it, but there was something in the way he had always looked out for me, something in his steady presence that made me feel like I could turn to him for support. I called him from my car, my voice quiet but steady. "Carlos, it's me," I said, my voice wavering slightly despite my efforts to sound calm. "I need somewhere to stay for a while. Can you help me?" It was only a moment before he answered. "Of course, Mrs. Parker," he said, his voice warm and reassuring, as it always was. "You can stay with me as long as you need. You're always welcome here." Carlos had a way of making everything feel like it was going to be okay. His words weren't just empty reassurances. They were a promise, and he always kept his promises. When I arrived at Carlos's apartment later that evening, I could feel the weight of the day still hanging over me. But as soon as I stepped inside, there was a warmth that I hadn't felt in a while. The apartment was simple, but it was comfortable. Carlos had a small kitchen with a wooden table where we often sat together when he came over for dinner, talking about anything and everything. His apartment wasn't much, but it was home. He didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't offer many answers. Instead, we sat in silence for a while, the soft hum of the city outside the window filling the quiet space between us. It was a peaceful silence, not awkward, but comforting, as if he understood that I needed time to sort through everything. I had always believed that family was the foundation of everything. In my younger days, I thought love, patience, and care were the keys to a happy life. And for the longest time, that belief served me well. My husband, Jack, and I built our home on these principles. We raised our 2 children, Daniel and Emily, in a small, cozy house in the suburbs. The kind of house with a white picket fence, a well-kept garden, and an open door where neighbours could always drop by. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours, and that was enough. Jack and I didn't come from wealth, but we didn't need it. We had each other, and that was all we needed to feel rich. Jack worked hard as a mechanic, and I stayed home, taking care of the children, cooking meals, and making sure our family stayed close. We always made sure there was food on the table, that the kids had what they needed, and that the house was full of love and laughter. I remember the days when Daniel and Emily were young. Daniel, always the quiet one, had a thoughtful nature. He loved to sit and read books, losing himself in stories of faraway places. Emily, on the other hand, was full of life. She loved dancing around the house, making up songs and stories, always the one to make us laugh. But when Daniel grew older, something changed. He became more serious, quieter than before. I could tell that he was growing up, and I couldn't help but feel a little sadness as he slipped further away from me. Then came Sarah. Sarah was everything I had hoped for in a partner for Daniel. She was beautiful, bright, and compassionate. When I first met her, she was so eager to be part of the family, always offering to help with the dishes or sitting down with me for tea. At first, I saw a lot of myself in her willingness to help, her warmth, her gentle spirit. She was everything Daniel needed, or so I thought. I welcomed her into our family with open arms. She and Daniel moved into their own place shortly after they were married, but we were always close. The dinners at our house became more frequent, and I loved having them over, especially when they brought my grandchildren. Those were some of the happiest days of my life, sitting around the table, hearing the sound of little feet running through the house, and feeling the warmth of a full, bustling home. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. At first, it was subtle. I would stop by their house with a casserole, or pick up the kids from school, and I'd notice Sarah seemed a little more distant, a little more tired. I didn't think much of it at first. She had 2 young children, after all, and was still adjusting to life as a new mom. But as the months went by, the visits became fewer. The invitations to family dinners stopped coming. I found myself alone more often, spending evenings with nothing but the sound of my own thoughts. I tried to talk to Sarah about it, but whenever I did, the conversation always seemed to fizzle out. She'd smile, nod, and tell me everything was fine, but there was always a tension in the air. And Daniel? He was caught in the middle. He never said anything when Sarah pulled away. He never stood up for me. And in a way, I think that hurt more than anything. He was my son, and I had always been there for him. But now, it seemed like I was invisible. I didn't want to admit it. But the truth was becoming clear. I wasn't needed anymore. I was no longer the matriarch of the family, the one they could rely on for advice, comfort, or love. I had become an afterthought, a part of their lives that they didn't have the time or energy for. Then there was Carlos. Carlos had been a part of our lives for many years. He had come into our family when Daniel was in college. He wasn't related by blood, but I always thought of him as one of my own. He had come from Brazil to study in the United States, and when he and Daniel became fast friends, it felt natural for him to spend holidays with us. Over time, Carlos became a steady presence in our lives. I think the thing that drew me to Carlos the most was his kindness. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words were thoughtful and measured. There was a quiet strength about him, a wisdom that came from living a life that had seen its fair share of struggles. He didn't talk about it much, but I knew he had a past. He had come from humble beginnings, a small town in Brazil where life wasn't always easy. But that was the past. And now, he was here, and he was a part of our family. Carlos wasn't just Daniel's friend. He was someone I trusted deeply. He was always there when we needed him. Whether it was fixing a broken appliance or helping me with a heavy box, Carlos was the first to offer assistance. He was a quiet soul, content to stand in the background, but when he did speak, you listened. He had this way of making you feel heard, making you feel important, even in the smallest of moments. But as things began to unravel with Sarah and Daniel, Carlos was the one person I could count on. He never asked questions. He simply showed up, ready to lend a hand or offer a listening ear. It was like he understood, even without words, that I needed someone to lean on. And while Daniel and Sarah drifted away, Carlos remained a steady anchor in my life. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I began to feel the weight of the distance growing between us. I was still invited to family events here and there, but the invites felt more like obligations than heartfelt gestures. They were the kind of invitations that came with a faint, almost apologetic tone, as if they were doing me a favor. But in those moments, I couldn't help but feel like I was the one being pushed aside. It wasn't just the lack of invitations, though. It was the little things, the quiet comments, the looks exchanged when I said something that didn't quite sit right with them. At first, I thought I was just being overly sensitive, but the more time passed, the more it became clear. My presence in their lives, the role I had once played, had been quietly fading into the background. I started wondering if it was my fault. Maybe I had been too much of a presence in their lives, too involved. I often thought back to the early days when I was so eager to help, offering advice, cooking meals, taking care of the kids. I had always prided myself on being a good mother and grandmother, but now I couldn't help but wonder if I had overstepped. Had I been smothering them with my love and care? Had I done something to push them away without realizing it? There were times when I sat alone in my living room, my hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, and I thought about all the things I had done for my family. The years of sleepless nights when my children were sick, the long hours I spent cooking meals for dinner parties, the holiday gatherings where I did my best to make everyone feel at home. I had always poured myself into my family, but now it seemed like that wasn't enough. Carlos was the only one who seemed to understand. He had always been a quiet observer, a listener who didn't offer advice unless asked. But in the quiet moments, he would sit beside me and simply be there. And sometimes, that was all I needed. Someone who understood without needing to say a word. It was on one of those quiet evenings that Carlos came over. The air was crisp, and the soft hum of the city outside my window was the only sound in the room. Carlos knocked softly before entering, a small smile on his face. He was carrying a bag of groceries, something he did whenever he came over. It had become one of those small routines, a way for him to show he cared without making a big fuss. "Thought I'd bring over some of your favorites," Carlos said, setting the bag on the kitchen counter. "How are you doing?" I smiled, grateful for his presence. "Better now that you're here," I said, my voice soft. "I've been thinking a lot, Carlos. I don't know where things went wrong with Sarah and Daniel. It's like they don't need me anymore." Carlos didn't respond right away. He just looked at me, his dark eyes reflecting a depth of understanding. He'd always been the kind of person who didn't rush to offer solutions. Instead, he allowed space for the feelings to unfold, trusting that sometimes silence spoke louder than words. Finally, after a long pause, Carlos spoke. "You've always been there for them, Mom. Always. But maybe they don't know how to appreciate that. Not yet, anyway." His words hit me harder than I expected. The idea that they might not understand how much I had given, how much I had sacrificed, was a bitter pill to swallow. I had spent so many years trying to be everything for them, never asking for anything in return, never expecting anything in return. But perhaps, in doing so, I had inadvertently set myself up for disappointment. "I just don't know what to do anymore," I admitted, my voice cracking slightly. "I feel like I've lost my place. I've always been so sure of my role in their lives, but now I'm not even sure they want me around." Carlos reached across the table, gently taking my hand. "They don't know what they have," he said softly. "But that's not on you. You've done more than enough. It's their turn to figure it out." His words were comforting, but they didn't completely ease the ache I felt. I knew Carlos was right in many ways. It wasn't my fault that they had pulled away. But the truth was, it hurt. It hurt in a way that no words could heal. I had been the rock of our family, the one they turned to in times of need. But now, it felt like I had been forgotten. That night, as I sat in Carlos's apartment, the warm light from the kitchen casting a soft glow over the room, I realized that I couldn't keep waiting for them to come back. I couldn't keep hoping they would suddenly see how much I had given. It was time for me to start living for myself, to find my own way. And maybe, just maybe, that was the only way to show them that I wasn't just a forgotten piece of their past. I was still here, still strong, still capable of finding joy and purpose on my own terms. I had spent my entire life giving to others, but now it was time to find something for myself. It wasn't long after my conversation with Carlos that I realized something inside me had changed. For so many years, I had been giving everything I had to my family. I had poured my love, my time, and my energy into them without ever asking for anything in return. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten about myself. I had let my identity be defined by my role in the family. I was the grandmother, the one who always made sure the kids were fed, the one who kept the house filled with warmth and comfort. I had been the glue that held everything together. But now, without that role, I felt like I was floating in an ocean with no shore in sight. It wasn't as if I was angry. No, anger didn't seem to help. I had plenty of moments where I wanted to scream, to demand to know why they had pushed me away, why they didn't need me anymore. But I knew that wouldn't bring me peace. It would only keep me trapped in a cycle of resentment. Instead, I focused on the quiet strength I had left within me, the same strength that had helped me get through difficult times in the past. One afternoon, after spending several days with Carlos and finding solace in his calm presence, I decided I needed to make some changes. I couldn't keep waiting for my family to come back to me. I needed to take control of my own life, to stop letting their actions define my happiness. I started small. I took a walk around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in years. The air was crisp, and the streets were lined with the colors of autumn. The golden leaves danced in the wind, falling gently to the ground. I felt something stir inside me as I walked, an unfamiliar sense of freedom. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking with a sense of duty or obligation. I wasn't thinking about what I needed to do for others. I was just walking, just being. It was in these small moments that I began to reconnect with myself. I rediscovered old hobbies I had put aside for years: knitting, gardening, reading. I began to find joy in the simple things again, in the quiet moments that didn't require me to be needed by anyone. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my past decisions lift off my shoulders. Carlos noticed the change in me too. It wasn't just that I was spending more time by myself. It was the way I carried myself. He could see that I was starting to reclaim my sense of self, to stop relying on my family's approval for my happiness. One evening, he invited me over to his apartment again, this time for a simple dinner. As always, he had cooked a delicious meal, and we sat down together at the small table by the window. The night was quiet, and the soft hum of the city outside provided a calming background to our conversation. "I've noticed something different about you lately," Carlos said, his voice gentle as he passed me a plate of food. "You seem lighter, in a way, more at peace." I smiled at him, grateful for his kind words. "I think I'm finally starting to understand something," I replied, taking a bite of the food he had made. "I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else, making sure they were okay. But I forgot to take care of myself. I didn't realize how much I had lost of myself in the process." Carlos nodded, his eyes soft with understanding. "You've always been the heart of your family, Mrs. Parker. But now it's time to take care of your own heart. They'll find their way, but you can't wait for them forever. You deserve to live for yourself now." His words echoed in my mind long after that evening had ended. I knew he was right. I couldn't keep waiting for my family to come around. I couldn't keep hoping that they would suddenly see what they had taken for granted. It was time for me to start living for myself, to stop waiting for someone else's permission to be happy. It wasn't easy. Letting go of the past, of the family I had spent my whole life caring for, was one of the hardest things I had ever done. But slowly, over time, I began to find a new sense of freedom. I began making my own choices, big and small, without feeling the need to justify them to anyone. One of the first things I did was sign up for a pottery class. I had always loved art, but it was something I had put aside years ago, thinking it wasn't practical or important. But now, I realized that it didn't matter if it was practical. What mattered was that it brought me joy. I found myself losing track of time as I molded the clay, the gentle rhythm of my hands creating something beautiful. I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The pottery class became a turning point for me, a symbol of my new beginning. I was no longer just the grandmother or the mother. I was a woman with my own passions, my own desires, and I wasn't going to wait for anyone's permission to pursue them. But even as I embraced this new sense of independence, the quiet ache of my family's absence still lingered. I missed my grandchildren's laughter. I missed the way the family would come together at holidays, filling the house with warmth and chaos. I missed Sarah and Daniel, even if they didn't seem to miss me. One evening, after a few months of settling into this new routine, I decided to reach out. I wasn't going to beg or plead for their love, but I wanted them to know I was still here. I wanted them to know that I hadn't disappeared completely. I sent Sarah a text, something simple. "I'm thinking of you. Hope everything is well." I didn't expect a reply, but I felt the need to send it anyway. It was my way of extending an olive branch without giving up my newfound peace. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from her. It was short, but it was enough. "Thanks, Mum. I've been thinking about you too. Let's talk soon." My heart swelled with a quiet hope. Maybe they didn't completely understand yet, but they were beginning to see. And that was enough for now. As the months passed, I found myself settling into a rhythm. My life had taken on a new meaning, one that didn't revolve around my family's needs or expectations. I wasn't entirely free from the weight of their absence, but I was learning to live with it. I had finally found the courage to take the first steps toward living for myself, and with each passing day, I felt more at peace. Pottery became my escape, a small, quiet hobby that reminded me of the simple joys in life. I would often lose track of time in my little studio, the spinning wheel of clay grounding me in the present. It wasn't about creating something perfect, but about finding flow in the process. It was in these moments that I rediscovered the woman I had forgotten. I had spent so many years as a mother, a grandmother, that I had lost sight of who I was outside of those roles. But now, every time I shaped the clay, I felt a part of me that had been buried for too long. A part of me that had always loved beauty, loved to create, and loved to find joy in simple things. Pottery became a meditation, a way to quiet my thoughts. And for the first time in a long while, it allowed me to breathe without constantly feeling the pressure to be something for someone else. Carlos noticed the change in me, of course. He would often visit my studio, bringing with him fresh produce or a new recipe he had discovered. We would sit together, sipping coffee, and talk about the latest developments in our lives. Our conversations were easy, comfortable, like the kind you have with an old friend who knows you better than you know yourself. He never pressured me to share more than I was ready to. He just let me be. It was during one of these visits that he said something that stuck with me. He was sitting across from me, his coffee cup in hand, when he looked at me with a thoughtful expression. "You know," he said, "I've watched you change over these past few months. I've seen you take control of your life in ways I never thought you would. And it's inspiring, Mrs. Parker. You've shown me something I didn't know I needed to see." I paused, taking in his words. Carlos was never one to compliment anyone lightly, so his words carried weight. "I've spent too many years living for others," I said softly, my fingers tracing the edge of a ceramic bowl I had just finished. I didn't even realize it until recently, but now I'm starting to live for myself, and it feels good. He smiled, his dark eyes warm with approval. "You deserve it. You've earned it." His words, though simple, struck a chord in me. It was a reminder that I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I wasn't making these changes to get their approval or attention. I was doing this for me, for the woman I had left behind in the hustle of motherhood, grandmotherhood, and family obligations. I was finally giving myself the chance to exist, to take up space, without needing to justify it to anyone. One evening, as I sat in my studio, my hands covered in clay, my phone buzzed with a message. I wiped my hands on a towel and glanced at the screen. It was from Sarah. "I've been thinking about you. Can we talk?" For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. I had reached out to her months ago, but hadn't heard anything back until now. My heart skipped a beat, and my mind raced. Was this it? Was this the moment where things would finally shift? I put the phone down for a moment, gathering my thoughts. I wasn't sure what Sarah wanted, but I knew I had to approach it differently this time. I wasn't going to beg for her approval or her love. I wasn't going to seek validation. What I had learned over the past few months was that I could stand on my own, regardless of what anyone else thought. I wasn't waiting for anyone to fill the void in my heart anymore. I texted her back. "Of course. Let me know when you're free." The days that followed felt like an eternity. I spent my time focusing on my art, and as much as I wanted to anticipate the conversation with Sarah, I didn't let it consume me. I was no longer living in a constant state of waiting. I had built a life for myself, and it was enough. Finally, the day came. Sarah called me, her voice tentative at first. "Mum, I don't know where to start," she said, her words carefully measured. "I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I know I've been distant. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've just been caught up in my own life, my own frustrations. But I see now how much I've pushed you away, and I want to fix it." I let her words sink in. I hadn't expected this, not after everything. There had been so much time and distance between us, but hearing her speak with such honesty made me realize something important. Healing couldn't happen if I was still holding on to resentment. "I've missed you," I said, my voice steady but full of emotion. "I've missed our time together, but I also know that I can't keep giving without taking care of myself first." "I understand," Sarah replied softly. "I really do, and I want to make things right. Can we start over?" I felt a quiet sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be perfect, but it was a start, a real, honest start, and that's all I needed. It wasn't an overnight change. Rebuilding our relationship took time, and I had to be patient, not just with Sarah, but with myself. I had to relearn how to be a grandmother without overextending myself. I had to find a balance between being there for my family and honoring the life I had built for myself, but it was worth it. Over time, I began to feel the warmth of our bond returning. Sarah would call me more often, asking for advice, sharing the kids' milestones with me, and even inviting me over for dinners. Daniel, too, started reaching out more. It wasn't the same as it had been before, but it was real, and that was enough for me. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, the familiar laughter of my grandchildren filling the air, I realized that this new chapter of my life wasn't just about me finding peace. It was about giving my family the space to see me as more than just the caretaker. It was about showing them that I had a life outside of them, a life that I loved, and that they could be a part of if they chose to. And as I looked around the table, surrounded by the people I loved, I knew that this was the beginning of something new, something beautiful, something I hadn't imagined possible. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The weeks that followed felt like a delicate dance, one that required patience, understanding, and above all, a deep commitment to healing. There was a noticeable change in Sarah. It wasn't instant, and it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was real. She started coming to me with questions, asking for my help with the kids, or just to talk. And when we did talk, there was no longer the underlying tension that had once defined our conversations. We were no longer walking on eggshells around each other. Slowly but surely, we were learning how to be in each other's lives again. I still remember the first time Sarah invited me over for dinner after everything had happened. It wasn't an elaborate meal, just spaghetti and salad, but it felt like the most significant dinner we had ever shared. We sat down at the kitchen table, just the two of us, with Daniel and the kids in the other room, and for the first time in a long time, we talked openly, honestly. There were no defenses, no walls between us. "I'm sorry, Mom," Sarah said, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. "I wasn't just distant from you. I was distant from myself too, and I let it all spill over onto you." I didn't expect her to say that, and it took me by surprise. I looked at her, seeing her with a new clarity. She wasn't just my daughter-in-law anymore. She was a woman who had been struggling in her own way, someone who had lost touch with herself just like I had. And in that moment, I realized something important. We were both learning to navigate this new chapter together. "I understand, Sarah," I said gently. "We all go through times when we feel lost, but we find our way again, in time." She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't want to lose you, Mom. I don't want to push you away again." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You won't. You don't have to. But I can't keep being the person you turn to when things are tough. I have to take care of myself too. I can't pour from an empty cup." She squeezed my hand, her gaze softening. "I promise. I'll do better. I'll be more mindful of how I treat you, of how I take you for granted." And just like that, something shifted. We weren't back to where we once were, but we were closer. We were beginning the journey of rebuilding, not just the relationship between a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, but a deeper connection, one rooted in mutual respect and understanding. Forgiveness was never easy for me. It's something I had always believed in, but it's one thing to forgive in theory and another to actually do it. I had been hurt, deeply, and it would have been so easy to hold on to that hurt, to let it consume me. But over the months, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the behavior or pretending it hadn't happened. It was about freeing myself from the weight of resentment. It was about letting go of the past so that I could move forward into something better. I had forgiven Sarah, and in turn, I had forgiven Daniel. The years of silence, the moments when he stood by and didn't defend me, were still there. But I knew that if I wanted to rebuild anything with him, I couldn't keep holding on to the anger. One afternoon, I decided to reach out to Daniel. He had been quiet for a while, and though we had exchanged a few messages, we hadn't really talked. I sent him a simple text. "I'd like to talk. Let me know when you're free." It didn't take long before he called. His voice sounded hesitant, unsure, but I could tell he wanted to talk. "Mum, I know I've let you down," he said quietly. "I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know how to help you or Sarah. I was just trying to keep the peace, but I see now that I've failed you." His words, though few, were a balm to my heart. It wasn't an apology I had been waiting for, but it was one that I needed. For so long, I had waited for him to acknowledge my pain, to see how much I had been giving. And now, finally, he was seeing me again. "You haven't failed me, Daniel," I said, my voice steady. "You're my son, and I will always love you. But I need you to understand that I can't keep putting myself aside for everyone else. I can't keep waiting for you to need me. I have to live for myself too." There was a pause on the other end of the line, but then he spoke again, this time with more certainty. "I get it, Mum, and I'm proud of you for finally doing that. I don't know how we'll get back to where we were, but I want to try." That was enough for me, for now. We didn't have all the answers, but the fact that we were both willing to try, to move forward, meant more than I could express in words. 10. The first step toward healing. It wasn't easy, this journey of rebuilding. It took time, patience, and a lot of quiet, painful moments of introspection. But through it all, I began to see that this wasn't just about mending my relationship with Sarah and Daniel. It was about mending myself, about healing the parts of me that I had neglected for so long. I learned that healing didn't come from constantly giving or seeking validation from others. It came from within, from choosing to love myself first, from finding joy in my own company, and from embracing the simple, quiet moments of peace that filled my days. Carlos had been right all along. I had spent my life being the one who cared for everyone else. But now it was time to take care of myself. And when I did that, when I gave myself the space to grow and heal, the people who mattered most began to find their way back to me. Not because I had forced them, but because I had finally found my own path. 11. Ending. A new chapter. Now, as I look back on everything that has happened, on the hurt, the forgiveness, the quiet strength I've found in myself, I realize that life is full of these moments. It's full of the unexpected turns, the times when you're forced to let go of what you thought was certain and find something new. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that I'm ready for it. And for the first time in a long time, I feel whole again. The family I once knew may never be the same, but I'm learning to accept that. What matters now is that I've found a peace within myself that I never knew I had. And that, in the end, is the greatest gift of all. The road to rebuilding my family, to finding the balance between healing and holding on, was slower than I expected. There were days when I felt like everything was falling back into place, and other days when it seemed like we were starting all over again. But each day that passed, I learned more about myself and the people I loved. After that initial conversation with Sarah, things didn't immediately go back to normal. It wasn't as if I woke up one day and everything was magically fixed. The distance between us still lingered, the years of silence hanging like a veil over our relationship. But there were moments, small moments, where I felt a spark of something real, a true connection, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. I remember the first time Sarah called me to help with the kids again. It was nothing big, just a request to pick them up from school because she had a meeting that ran late. But as I drove them home that afternoon, listening to them talk about their day, I realized something important. The joy of being a grandmother hadn't gone anywhere. It was still there, just waiting for me to embrace it again. When I arrived at Sarah's house, she met me at the door with a smile, a genuine one this time. She had asked me over for dinner that evening, and for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like an obligation. It felt like a real invitation. I didn't know if things would be perfect that night, but I knew it was a step forward. "Mum, I've been thinking a lot," Sarah said as she served the meal. "And I've realized how much I took for granted. You've always been there, and I never appreciated it enough." I looked at her, feeling the weight of those words settle in my heart. "It's not about the things I've done for you, Sarah. It's about me being here, just being a part of your life." She nodded, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. We didn't talk about the past much that evening. Instead, we focused on the present. We laughed with the kids. We talked about our hopes for the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of family surrounding me again. Not the loud, chaotic kind of warmth, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing we were all moving in the right direction. A few weeks after that dinner, I had another conversation, this time with Daniel. He had been quieter than usual, but I could sense the change in him. The walls that had once been between us were slowly coming down. One Sunday afternoon, I called him up and asked if he wanted to meet for coffee. It was a simple invitation, but it meant more than I realized. Daniel had always been a man of few words, a man who never quite knew how to express his emotions. But as we sat across from each other at the small coffee shop, sipping our drinks, I could see something had shifted in him. His posture was less tense, his eyes softer. "Mum, I know I haven't been there for you the way I should have," Daniel started, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm sorry for that. I didn't understand how much I was hurting you by not standing up for you. I just didn't know how to deal with everything." "I know, Daniel," I replied. "I don't blame you for that. But I do need you to understand something. I'm not going to keep waiting for you to need me. I can't." He nodded slowly. "I get it. I've been selfish in a way, and I want to be better. I want to be a better son. I don't want to keep pushing you away." And just like that, something inside me shifted too. I realized that all these years of waiting, of holding on to hope, had finally reached a point where it wasn't about waiting for them anymore. It was about living my life. But as I looked at Daniel, I saw the man he had become, a man who was learning, who was growing, even if it was slower than I had hoped. "I'm proud of you, Daniel," I said, my voice softening. "But I need you to understand something important. I'm not going to change who I am for you anymore. I'm not going to keep holding back for the sake of making you comfortable. This is my time now." I looked at her, feeling the weight of those words settle in my heart. "It's not about the things I've done for you, Sarah. It's about me being here, just being a part of your life." She nodded, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. We didn't talk about the past much that evening. Instead, we focused on the present. We laughed with the kids. We talked about our hopes for the future. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the warmth of family surrounding me again. Not the loud, chaotic kind of warmth, but the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing we were all moving in the right direction. A few weeks after that dinner, I had another conversation, this time with Daniel. He had been quieter than usual, but I could sense the change in him. The walls that had once been between us were slowly coming down. One Sunday afternoon, I called him up and asked if he wanted to meet for coffee. It was a simple invitation, but it meant more than I realized. Daniel had always been a man of few words, a man who never quite knew how to express his emotions. But as we sat across from each other at the small coffee shop, sipping our drinks, I could see something had shifted in him. His posture was less tense, his eyes softer. "Mum, I know I haven't been there for you the way I should have," Daniel started, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm sorry for that. I didn't understand how much I was hurting you by not standing up for you. I just didn't know how to deal with everything." "I know, Daniel," I replied. "I don't blame you for that. But I do need you to understand something. I'm not going to keep waiting for you to need me. I can't." He nodded slowly. "I get it. I've been selfish in a way, and I want to be better. I want to be a better son. I don't want to keep pushing you away." And just like that, something inside me shifted too. I realized that all these years of waiting, of holding on to hope, had finally reached a point where it wasn't about waiting for them anymore. It was about living my life. But as I looked at Daniel, I saw the man he had become, a man who was learning, who was growing, even if it was slower than I had hoped. "I'm proud of you, Daniel," I said, my voice softening. "But I need you to understand something important. I'm not going to change who I am for you anymore. I'm not going to keep holding back for the sake of making you comfortable. This is my time now." "I understand, Mom," he said, and there was something in his eyes, something that told me he did. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't just the mother or the grandmother. I wasn't defined by those roles anymore. I was simply me, and that was enough. Healing wasn't a linear process. Some days felt easier than others. There were moments when I felt the pain of the past creeping back in, reminding me of the hurt I had carried for so long. But more often than not, I found myself surrounded by a quiet peace. I wasn't dependent on anyone else to make me feel whole. I wasn't waiting for Sarah or Daniel to acknowledge my worth. I had already done that for myself. One of the most powerful moments in this journey came when I stood in front of my pottery wheel, shaping a new piece of clay. The soft hum of the wheel beneath my hands felt like a reflection of my own steady, slow rhythm. The world outside was noisy, but in that moment, it felt like everything was in harmony. My hands moved instinctively, creating something from nothing, much like I had been doing in my own life. I was building something new, shaping it with intention, patience, and care. Carlos, as always, was there to support me. He had become a steady presence, not just as a friend, but as someone who understood my need for quiet and space. He didn't ask for anything in return. He simply showed up, and that was enough. It was on one of those quiet evenings, sitting on the porch after a long day of working on my pottery, that I realized how much my life had transformed. I was no longer waiting for someone else to give me the validation I had once craved. I had found it within myself, and in that moment, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. My family was beginning to understand, and I was learning to live for myself. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for whatever it might bring. The relationships with my family weren't perfect, but they were real, grounded in mutual respect. I no longer needed to force things. I wasn't waiting for them to see me in the way I wanted them to. I was simply living my life, embracing the changes, and seeing where it would take me. I had learned that family didn't have to be perfect to be meaningful. It didn't have to fit into the idealized version I had once held in my mind. What mattered was the love and effort we all put in, even if it was imperfect. We were all growing, all learning, and that was enough for me. And so, as I looked ahead, I knew that whatever came next, I would face it with the quiet strength that had become my foundation. The family I had once known may never be the same, but I had finally learned to embrace who I was, who I had always been, and who I would continue to grow into. And that, I realized, was enough. As the months turned into a year, I found myself stepping into a new chapter of my life. It wasn't as if the past had disappeared. No, the memories were still there. The quiet ache of being pushed away, the feeling of being forgotten. But those feelings no longer defined me. They were part of my story, but they didn't have control over my present. I had learned to create a life for myself outside of my family. I had rediscovered passions I had long put aside: pottery, reading, even simple walks in the park. Things that made me feel like me, not just a mother, a grandmother, or a caregiver. I realized that I could enjoy my life, independent of anyone else's expectations, and that was liberating. One of the most surprising things I discovered was how much I had been missing out on by waiting for things to return to the way they were. I thought I had been patient, waiting for Sarah and Daniel to come around, for them to realize the sacrifices I had made for them. But the truth was, I hadn't been living in the meantime. I had been waiting for something that may never come. So I started living again. Carlos was there through it all. He never pushed me to share anything I wasn't ready to, but he encouraged me in ways I hadn't expected. He didn't just offer advice, he offered companionship. We spent more time together, not out of obligation, but because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. I began to realize that the kind of support I had been craving from my family was something I had found in him. A quiet, steady presence that didn't demand anything from me, but allowed me to be myself. I remember one evening, after a particularly long day at the pottery studio, Carlos and I sat on the porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains. He turned to me, his expression soft. "You know, Mrs. Parker, you've come a long way. I don't think you see it yet, but you've changed. You've become stronger." I smiled at him, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over me. I've had to. I couldn't keep living for others. I had to learn how to live for myself. Carlos nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "And you're doing a beautiful job of it." His words were simple, but they were enough. In those quiet moments, I began to understand just how far I had come. There were days when I still missed the way things used to be, but I no longer let those moments define me. I was building something new, something better. As the year moved on, life continued to surprise me. My relationships with my family continued to evolve, not as I had originally hoped, but in a way that was far more fulfilling. My connection with Daniel grew deeper as we began to have more honest conversations, ones that went beyond surface-level small talk. We shared our frustrations, our hopes, and the things we hadn't been able to express before. One evening, Daniel came over to visit. He brought his kids with him, and we all sat around the table, talking about everything and nothing at all. It was one of those simple moments, nothing grand, just family being together. But it was enough. I looked around the table and realized that even though our family had been through so much, it was still ours. It was imperfect, yes, but it was real, and it was something I could hold on to. "I'm glad you're here, Mum," Daniel said, his voice quieter than usual. "I'm proud of you. You've shown me that it's okay to take care of myself, to not be afraid to live my own life." Those words, coming from him, meant more than I could say. He had been the one I had tried to hold on to for so long, and now, here he was, telling me that he had learned from my example. That, in itself, felt like a victory. And then there was Carlos. He remained my steady rock throughout all of this. We spent more time together, not because we had to, but because we wanted to. He had been there when I needed him the most. And now, as we continued to support each other, I realized that sometimes the best relationships aren't the ones you force. They're the ones that grow naturally when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open. Looking back at the journey I had been on, I realized that it wasn't just about reclaiming my place in my family's life. It was about reclaiming myself. It was about finding the strength to stand on my own, to live for me, and to let my family find their way back to me in their own time. I had learned that family wasn't something you could force. It wasn't something you could make fit into the mold you envisioned. It was messy, imperfect, and often painful. But it was also full of love, real love, the kind that doesn't need constant validation or approval, the kind that lasts, even when everything else is uncertain. I had also learned that healing doesn't come from waiting for others to change. It comes from changing yourself, from taking control of your own happiness and living in a way that honors who you are. When you do that, when you stop waiting for someone else to fix things, you give yourself the freedom to be who you truly are. And in that freedom, you find peace. And with that peace, I faced the future with open arms. Whatever it held, I knew I was ready. I had finally learned to live for myself. And in doing so, I had created a life that was all my own. As I sit here now, years after the day Sarah told me to leave, I realize that everything I thought I knew about life, about family, about love, has shifted. It hasn't been easy, but it has been worth it. Every moment of pain, every tear, every quiet, lonely evening spent wondering if I would ever be enough, it has all led me to this place. And I have found something that I didn't even know I was searching for. Peace. It wasn't something I could force, something I could ask for or demand. It came quietly, over time, like the slow, gentle rhythm of the seasons changing. It came when I stopped waiting for the world to bend to my will, when I finally accepted that I couldn't control how others saw me or how they chose to treat me. It came when I decided that I was enough, just as I was, without needing anyone else's validation. I've learned that love doesn't always look the way you expect it to. It doesn't always come in grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes love is quiet. It's in the small, everyday acts of kindness. It's in the way Sarah and I can now sit together and talk without the tension we once shared. It's in the way Daniel no longer sees me as just a caretaker, but as a woman with her own life, her own passions. I've learned that family doesn't always stay the same. People change. Relationships change. Sometimes you have to let go of the idea of what you thought family should be and allow it to evolve into something that works for everyone. It doesn't always look perfect, but it's real, and that's enough. Carlos, too, has been a constant throughout it all. He's not just a friend or a support system anymore. He's someone who taught me that sometimes the best relationships are the ones that grow quietly, without force. He's shown me the beauty of being content with the present, of living without expectations. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that whatever it is, I'll face it with the quiet strength I've come to embrace. Now, when I look around at my life, I see something different than I once did. I see a life that is my own. I see a woman who has spent years giving and loving, but who has finally learned to give herself the same love she's given to others. I see someone who has found joy in the simple moments, walking through the park, reading a book, working on my pottery, and spending time with those who choose to be a part of my life. My grandchildren still run to me when they see me, their eyes wide with excitement, and I see the love in their faces. Sarah and Daniel, too, have come to understand what it means to appreciate the time we have together. We've all changed, grown, and learned the importance of living for ourselves, while still holding space for one another. The future is still unknown. There are moments when I wonder what's next, whether I will continue to build my art, travel to new places, or simply enjoy the life I've created for myself. But whatever happens, I know one thing. I will face it with open arms, just as I do now. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm waiting for anything. I don't feel like I'm waiting for my family to come around or for anyone else to make things right. I've learned that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else. It comes from within. As I sit here, quietly reflecting on everything that's happened, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the family I've built, for the lessons I've learned, and for the woman I've become. I've found my place in the world, not as a mother or a grandmother, but as me. And that, I've come to understand, is enough. So whatever comes next, I'm ready for it. With quiet strength, open arms, and a heart full of peace, I'm ready for whatever the future brings. The greatest lesson I've learned from all of this is that we can't live our lives waiting for others to validate us, to give us the love we think we deserve. True peace comes when we stop waiting for someone else to change and start changing ourselves. When we live for ourselves, when we stop chasing approval and start living in the truth of who we are, that's when we truly begin to heal. And that's the real gift in all of this. Not the reconciliation, not the family coming back to me, but the realization that I can be whole on my own, that I am enough, just as I am.